The United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia here.
Not surprisingly, the Ukrainian President, Vladimir Zelensky, is on board with this. Why wouldn't he be? He's asked Joe Biden for an American-enforced no-fly zone. But as we said, many in Congress are for it, too. Here's Adam Kinzinger.
I think this is time where we need to, at the invitation of Ukraine, declare Ukraine a no-fly zone enforced by NATO and the United States. We certainly have the capability to do that. The airspace is still contested by the Ukrainians. We could certainly shut down Russian air operations even if we don't directly engage Russian troops on the ground.
We can shut down Russian air operations even if we don't directly engage Russian troops on the ground.
Okay, like I just showed you, we seem to be pretty close to World War III in those two clips. That's Adam Kinzinger and Adam Schiff, two members of the State Department and Congress, calling for basically war with Russia, talking about shooting down their planes, talking about going over there and engaging with them. It's unbelievable. But anyways, here I will explain to you why we actually are gonna go into World War III. And why I believe this is the red horseman of the apocalypse bringing war, and why this is biblical times and why we're living in biblical prophecy. Okay, so here we go. Like everything, when you want to find the truth about a subject, you have to peel through the bullshit first. Kind of like peeling an onion on a fruit, right? And then once you peel through all the bullshit, you can find the truth in the middle and the juicy fruit. The peel, it's like the narrative, then the counter narrative, and I guess the fruit would be the actual truth, right? So what is the actual narrative, right? Like the narrative, let's put, for example, Russia, let's take this from the point of view of Russia. The narrative of Russia is that, if you remember during the Cuban Missile Crisis, by the way, I'm Cuban, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the USSR had a lot of like missiles really close to the US border, and it was getting pretty crazy. The US was pretty scared. So in order to de-escalate the situation, the US talked to the USSR and they agree on de-escalating and removing missiles from their bordering states, right? So if you are familiar with the Iron Curtain, back when the USSR had half of Europe and had control of all Eastern Europe, the part when it came into contact with NATO was called the Iron Curtain. And right, so the Iron Curtain, there was a bunch of missiles aiming at the Russian territory and same vice versa, and Russia just took it a step farther and put it in Cuba, right? And that got really out of control, and that's what started the negotiations, and decided to de-escalate. And what they agreed on was that there will be no missiles that close to each other's territory, right? I take missiles out of Cuba, you take the missiles away from the bordering states in Eastern Europe, right? That makes sense. So what goes on later, right? Fast forward to the future, the USSR collapses, all these states that were behind the Iron Curtain and were part of the USSR are no longer part of the USSR, and a good chunk of them eventually, over time, joined NATO, despite it had been agreed after when the Iron Curtain collapsed by Ronald Reagan and the USSR that there would be no previous states of the USSR that would join NATO, right? As a war deterrent, they said, okay, we will let the states self-determine, like Poland, Romania, Yugoslavia, etc. All this, Ukraine, one of them, we'll let them be self-determined, we'll let them break away from the USSR. In exchange, they're not allowed to join NATO because that would escalate war tensions, right? And so please don't do it. So basically, after a while, like when the old generations die and they forget, the new generations come in and they say, oh yeah, let's add this guy to NATO, let's add this other guy to NATO, and they've already broke that a few times. So this is not the first time that it happens, nor it's going to be the last. So they made countries that were part of the USSR before part of NATO now, right? Until there you follow. So what happens with Ukraine? The thing is with Ukraine, for a while now, this is in the late 2000s, Russia and Putin have been saying, Ukraine is my line of the side. You've already broke this pact various times. Ukraine is my last line of the sand. Ukraine is not allowed to have NATO bases because they're right on our border, and we're not going to let that stand. So if the Ukraine keeps joining NATO and the EU, then it's war. Russia has said this repeatedly, like it says here, saying that the US is parking missiles on the porch of our house, right? And it's telling this to Western
talked
media.
a lot about security guarantees, and now we've seen your proposals. You also say you have no intention of invading Ukraine. So will you guarantee unconditionally that you will not invade Ukraine or any other sovereign country? Or does that depend on how negotiations go?
So basically, she's asking him to say unconditionally that he will never invade Ukraine. So he's not going to say that, because obviously many things could go wrong, and you may need to invade a country. Like, if this seems obvious, if you think, oh no, you should never invade a country, it's wrong to be invade a country. I tell you this, as a Cuban who lived in Cuba my whole life, I believe someone should have invaded our country. There was no way for us to overthrow our country. It was complete, utter hell. And I would have loved for anybody, the US or anybody, to overthrow that bullshit government. You know what I mean? So, no, I do. I think there's circumstances where, yeah, you're justified to invade a country. Like, many other times, I mean, the US almost invaded Cuba over the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's not forget this. And the US invaded Panama over way less than this. So let's not forget all of these things. So he obviously goes forward. This is a long video. I don't want to go through all of this. But he responds that no, that basically if they join NATO, if the Ukraine joins NATO and puts a base there and parks missile in the backyard of Russia, then yes, they will invade Ukraine, basically. Yeah. So up to there you follow. So that is the narrative from Russia, right? So once the new president, right, like Ukraine's president, once the new president Vladimir Zelensky took power, he said yes to NATO. He was like, hey, NATO told him, hey, you want to put bases on your country? And he said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. They haven't done it yet, but he agreed to it. So that's what triggered the war, right? So this guy orchestrated the whole war, started the war with Russia. You could say that Russia invaded, yeah, and he started the war. But basically, this guy kind of instigated. It's like he's talking. Obviously, this is kind of like a guy who at school, you know, and then they punch you in the mouth, right? Like, yeah, this guy didn't start the fight. He didn't punch the other guy in the mouth, but he's the little shit talking shit behind everyone's back and starting and getting everybody pissed off and saying, yo, man, and telling your best friend this and your girl this and etc. And just, you know, like spreading rumors. And this is what got him punched in the mouth, right? So this is what happened. He basically broke, like, international codes that were agreed on decades ago, and on top of that he agreed to, like, he broke what had been warned many times by Russia was a line in the sand. So whatever, what is the counter narrative from him? What does he say? Oh, we're an independent country, we're Ukraine, and if we want to join NATO, we join NATO. We want to join EU, that's fine, that's what we choose, that's the democratic will of the people, right? So that's his narrative, right? But is that true, right? Like, we have to see if it's true, right? And it isn't, right? Like, when you actually look at what happened in Ukraine, if anybody can remember, in 2014, Ukraine had an uprising, right? A huge, they call it the revolution of dignity, right? Wikipedia's already telling, but it was a revolution. They destroyed Kiev. Look at this. Not even Putin has done this much damage to Ukraine. Yeah, look at this. They destroyed, it was like Black Lives Matter. They just destroyed all of Kiev, set it on fire. There were people dead, there were shootings. I think you can find pictures still of people with guns, right? Like in these protests, shooting each other, right? So this was a violent revolution to overthrow the democratically elected leader, who at that time was pro-Russian. So the democratically elected leader was joining Russia and was part of like they've been having ties with Russia for a long time. It wasn't like he was getting closer to Russia. They had ties with Russia for many times. And they overthrow this guy saying they want to join NATO, they want to join the EU, right? And you're like, what? So they overthrow the democratic elected with protests just like Black Lives Matter. But you figure, who orchestrated this? Who overthrew this power? Well, it was the US. It was Obama with the US State Department, with the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans are in on it too. I mean, McCain's daughter calls her dad the father of the Ukraine protest revolution, right? So using the CIA and the State Department, they fund the neo-Nazis in Ukraine to start a revolution of color, a color revolution. I mean, color revolution is when the CIA and the State Department fund the minorities in a country to appear like they're a majority, to just make life a hell for everybody, and they're just protest, occupy, be violent, to make it seem to the outside world or to the people there that they are the majority. How else could the system just collapse and be impossible to get around and just have constant process if they weren't the majority, right? So that's how they do it, right? Like in Syria, they use ISIS. They fund ISIS to overthrow Assad, because that's the only thing they have there. They only have Islamic extremists. They can't use Asian lesbians to overthrow Assad, because there's no Asian lesbians in Syria to overthrow him, right? The same thing in Afghanistan, right? When they had the Soviets going to Afghanistan, they fund the Taliban to fight the Soviets, right? And then afterwards they go and fight the Taliban themselves, because it's not about agreeing with this. They don't agree with the neo-Nazis of Ukraine. They don't agree with them. It's just the only minority they can use there. There's no Black Lives Matters to use in Ukraine. They're not a group, Black Lives Matters, that you could utilize to overthrow the government of Ukraine. There's not enough black people in Ukraine to be used as a minority to overthrow it. The only minority they could use was these white supremacists, right? So Obama and Israel, including Israel, is part of this too, funds these neo-Nazis to overthrow the democratically elected leader that had close ties to Russia, and to take it in a whole new level and go closer to the European Union and NATO, right? So you understand what's going on. More of global homo stuff, being more part of this globalist alliance where all governments do everything in lockstep, and it doesn't matter where you go, they all have the same policies and everything, right? So this is basically what happened in Ukraine. So it's not that they are like joining the EU and NATO naturally because most people want this. This is an orchestrated psychological operation by the CIA and the State Department with massive amount of money behind it, including Israel, and it's all right. So you understand why do I say this? Because if you look at Zelensky was an actor. He was an actor in the most popular comedy TV show in Ukraine from 2015 to 2019. So right after they overthrow the government, right, in 2014, the State Department, Israel, and all of the US government machinery put this guy, right, like Hollywood and all these people, put this guy right at the front of the TV, which is MK Ultra, bro, psychological operation, brainwashing, and they put him in a hit TV show as the main actor, playing what? President. He's playing the president. Just basically every time the president did something wrong, the real president of Ukraine, you could just have him in the next episode doing everything right. Looking awesome, just saying the right things, being the most honest guy, looking amazing under the light, just psychologically operating the people to make him think this guy's the best thing since Jesus. This guy out here should be the president of Ukraine. Look at how well he speaks. Look at how he handles every issue, because he's given a parallel platform to be a parallel president. It's unbelievable. It's a psychological operation, and it actually succeeds, and he wins the presidency. And that's what happened, right? That's what happened in Ukraine. And then this is what leads to the war, right? And I just gave you the narrative and the counter narrative. So I'm about to give you the actual truth of what's happening in Ukraine. The truth is, what's going on in Ukraine is all orchestrated by the elites in a 2,500-year-old plan that they've been working on. It's basically the same thing that has been going on for millennia. It's the elite playing brother against brother, pitting them against each other, killing each other for the sake of their little games that they call prophecies, right? Prophecy is nothing but a plan that they set out to do, like a little game, and they play us like pawns until they fulfill their certain goal they have in mind that they call prophecy again. And this is exactly what's going on in Ukraine. The elites of Ukraine and Russia are distinct people to that of the working class in those countries. The working class of both countries are exactly the same, are the same ethnicity and religiously the same. They're literally the closest they can get to each other, and they're being pit on minor difference for the sake of a group that is actually quite distinct from them. And I mean this genetically. I mean like this bloodline. I'm talking about family bloodlines here. I'm talking about the people who are going to be fighting each other here. Ukrainian versus Russians are both Slavs, are both majority Orthodox Christians, and they're going to be killing each other like it has happened for millennia for the sake of kings and elites that are genetically distinct from them. They're different from them. And this is what I'll show you here in continuation. They are very, very, both of them, Putin and Zelensky, are both Jewish men. They are of Ashkenazi Jewish heritage, right? They come from that bloodline, royal bloodlines, and they are elite, and they are trying to fulfill a 2,500-year-old Jewish prophecy of the Bible, as I'll show you here in the next couple slides and on the screen as I talk. And just keep in mind, right, that this is actually what happened in Ukraine. This guy took power by using the power of the media, right? Once he psyoped everyone and MK Ultra the shit out of the Ukrainian people, he managed to get into power. He gets power, and then he instigates fight with Russia. Putin, who's part of this bloodline, is all too happy to oblige and send slab against slab to kill each other in this bloody war that, like I tell you, it's going to be World War III, because in order to fulfill the biblical prophecy, they have to destabilize the whole region, right? And Europe must fall so that Israel can rise. They know this is the prophecy. Europe must fall so that Israel can rise.
Nearly half of the passengers on this Ukrainian flight are immigrating to Israel.
We are very excited that you're here.
Minister of Aliyah and Integration Penina Tamano-Shata welcomed the newcomers.
Our message is very clear for the Jews of Ukraine. The state of Israel will always be open for them, for whoever chooses to come here, to embrace them, to accompany them, and certainly all of us are praying that the tension won't prevail and a war won't break out between Russia and Ukraine.
Dozens of Ukrainian Jews on this flight are some of the regular arrivals sponsored by the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Given the precarious situation in Ukraine, it's expected many more Ukrainian Jews will make their way here to Israel.
Israel was created to be a safe haven for the Jewish people.
The organization has helped Jews return to Israel for decades.
This is biblical prophecy coming to fruition. When you read the scriptures, how awesome is it that you don't only see it unfolding before your eyes, but that you're taking part in it. This is all possible, everything. All of these new immigrants coming off the plane in Israel, the fulfillment not only of their dream, but the dream of the prophets 2,500 years ago, is possible because Christians and Jews came together to bring them home.
Although not a rescue flight, the passengers are glad to be free from an uncertain situation.
We're scared because we don't know what happened, and we hope for our flight. We wait, and we waiting for our flight, and we're very happy that we are now in Israel.
3 generations of the Zelensky family made the trip.
We had a business in Donetsk. The first time they bombed all the businesses. Now we're afraid we'll lose everything again. Things are dangerous, and that's why we immigrated.
To be able to go someplace, and that's what the state of Israel is for the Jewish people all around the world. If they need to, should they choose to, whatever their reasons. And I'm so proud that the Christian community, for a full generation, has decided to take personal responsibility to bless the people of Israel in this very, very, very practical way.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv.
ויחולו השמיים ואורץ לכל צרור ויחל אלוהים בימסיק מלאכתו אשר עושו וישפוט בימסיק מלאכתו אשר עושו ויברך אל ימסים השביעי ויקדש איסוי כי בו ישובס מכל מלאכתו אשר בורו אלוהים לעשויס צברי מורונו ורבונו ורבו ישי ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגופן ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו במצוותיו ורוצה בנו שבת קודשי בעבור ורוצה מנחילנו זיכרונו קורוי למעשה בראשית כי הוא יום תחילו למקורי קוידש זכר לציאס מצרים כי בונו בוחרתו בואי סומו קידש.
There are fewer men in these crowds. Max is here because he's 17, just young enough to be permitted to leave.
I'm feeling pretty tired. It's been non-stop walking for the past 30 hours.
3 hours?
30.
30 hours?
Yes. I haven't slept yet, so it's not exactly the most pleasant feeling in the world. Probably 9 kilometers from the border, we moved on our feet.
Across the border back home in Ukraine, fathers, sons, brothers are staying behind to fight. Any man between the ages of 18 and 60 is prohibited from leaving Ukraine and encouraged to sign up. Across Ukraine, they're taking up weapons, strapping on fatigues and body armor, preparing to defend and possibly die.
I'm from Kiev. I traveled with my family to Western Ukraine just for vacation when it happened. So we decided yesterday that we want to leave the country because it's not clear what will be happening. I have a lot of my relatives in Kiev who are sitting in the bomb shelters right now because there is a bombing everywhere and people are afraid and scared. So we want to leave Ukraine right now, but I think that there is no possibility for men to leave. So we need to decide. I have a 5-year-old kid and I have also my sister who has 2 kids. So we are really scared and don't know what will happen here.
Three generations of the Zelensky family made the trip.
We had a business in Donetsk. The first time they bombed all the businesses. Now we're afraid we'll lose everything again. Things are dangerous, and that's why we immigrated.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv.
Right? And as I'll show you here, the demographics in Europe, right, are all in the tank. The only countries left are Poland, Ukraine, Finland, and a few in the Nordic countries. But if you look at migration and if you look at the young ages in school, not that this matters to me, but this is exactly what's going on. When you look at the schools in Europe, right, and you look at the ages 0 to 20, right, like the kids, like the demographics of tomorrow, those are over 50% brown and minority, meaning that in one generation, because right now you look at France, you look at Canada, you look at Spain, all these places, it's like 80% white, 70% white. Yeah, but that's not looking at the age groups, right? Like you could be 70% white, but still most of that could be 90% over 65, which is what's happening with baby boomers. When you actually look at the young age, once all the baby boomers die, it would seem sudden, like in one generation, the country will go from being 70% white to being like 40 to 30% white, because it's one generation. You look at the classrooms everywhere in the Western Hemisphere and they all look like this, right? I'll put it up on the screen, right? You'll see how the classrooms look. And those are going to be what the country is going to look like tomorrow in just 10, 20 years. This is not very long. So all those countries are done for. Now they're trying to end Poland, Ukraine, and by those countries I mean the Western Hemisphere. Now they're trying to end the Eastern Europe, right? So they're going to destabilize the whole region. It's going to be World War III, like I show you here in the clips, right? Like they want to go in there. They want to fight Russia. They want to start World War III. They want to pull the whole European and Western Hemisphere into the war in Eastern Europe, destabilize all of that, and destroy Europe so that Israel can rise, right?
It's expected many more Ukrainian Jews will make their way here to Israel.
Israel was created to be a safe haven for the Jewish people.
The organization has helped Jews return to Israel for decades.
This is biblical prophecy coming to fruition. When you read the scriptures, how awesome is it that you don't only see it unfolding before your eyes, but that you're taking part in it. This is all possible, everything, all these new immigrants coming off the plane in Israel, the fulfillment not only of their dream, but the dream of the prophets 2,500 years ago, is possible because Christians and Jews came together to bring them home.
So this guy, Zelensky, being less than half of a percent, think about this, the Jewish population in Ukraine is less than half of a percent of the whole population, yet using the power of the media and PSYOP and MK Ultra, PSYOP meaning psychological operation, he manages to take power. That's unreal, right? And then he implements war with Russia, then gets all the Jews out of there, right? This is what fulfills their prophecy. All these Jews are living in mass, in droves, leaving Ukraine by the thousands, no, by the, well, I guess there's no millions because there's so few of them, but all of them, hundreds of thousands, are being taken in planes, bus load. I'll put all the videos up here. And they're being taken, planes and bus loads, out of Ukraine to fulfill biblical prophecy. Meanwhile, this guy Zelensky is making everybody Ukrainian, all the Slavs 18 to 60 have to stay. All the 8 men 18 to 60 cannot leave, and he's putting guards on the border. Instead of setting guards to go fight the Russians, putting guards at the border to keep freaking 18 to 60 year old Slavs inside of Ukraine and giving them AKs to go kill other Slavs so they can kill each other. Isn't this crazy, bro? That's unreal. How could you let Jews flee the country and not make them fight for Ukraine, but make the Slavs fight for Ukraine? It makes no freaking sense, bro. It's exactly what I'm telling you, man. This is what I'm telling you. It's just like the Galicia versus Castile in Spain war, bro. It's just brother fighting each other. They put rules in place so they can't hurt each other. He's like, hey man, don't kill the king, and you don't kill the king, but yeah, you can kill each other. And then they go and kill each other with swords, all kill each other. But if you grab the king, you can't kill him. You have to let him go, and they can't kill you. It's retarded, man. This is what's going on. It's just brother for fighting against brother for freaking nothing, right? For freaking playing games and fulfilling their prophecies and fulfilling their plans, which is basically plans and prophecies, is basically a chess game that they're trying to accomplish, right? And it's just retarded. If I was a Ukrainian or a Russian, I would give up, man. No, I'm not fighting this guy for you, man. Why would I trade a king for a king, right? I've got to pay 20% tax or 50% tax either way. I don't care if it's to you or this guy. I don't care. You guys are the same. Why would I care if I pay to Jewish family X or Jewish family Y, right? Either way, I'm paying 20% tax or 40% tax or whatever, right? It's going to be to the same amount of tax, basically. It's just to this family or the other one, right?
No ha traído a todas sus tropas.
Les aventajamos en número, señor.
¿Y qué? Todo esto es una pelea entre hermanos. Pero la sangre que va a correr es la nuestra.
Dios os vio con buenos ojos. Y solo Él sabe por qué. Os dio un rey.
Un rey es un rey, qué carallo. Tú, Sancho, ¿qué más nos da? ¿Por qué hemos de luchar por ti?
By the way, man, before I go, just check them out leaving right here. This is bus loads of them leaving Ukraine right now. Flee from war zone. Look at all the buses. Just getting the hell out. Let's get the hell out of here, bro. Look at this. Getting in the bus. Anyways, you get the point. They're getting out, man. And then you have to be left to fight. And you know who's fighting? The neo-Nazis that Obama founded. Obama and Israel, I know this guy founded neo-Nazis. They are really neo-Nazis, bro. Here, I'll show you this. So you see. It's hilarious, bro. Oh my god. These guys are dumb. This is why they're neo-Nazis. Because at least the old Nazis were a little bit smarter than these guys. These guys are fucking idiots, man. They're fighting the genetically the closest thing to them, the other Slavs, right? And they're thinking they're doing it right because they're like freaking big guys, but they're doing it for a Jewish president. Because these neo-Nazis think that the problem is the blacks and the Muslims, even though the blacks and the Muslims have always gotten along with Hitler. And if you read Hitler, you know he thinks the blacks are the real Israelites. He thinks the blacks are the real Hebrews of the Bible. And Mein Kampf is the bestseller in all of South Arabia and like all of the Middle Eastern countries, right? But these neo-Nazis now go against those guys and align with the Jew. Unbelievable. To save a Jew, they fight for the Jew. Look at this idiot. Glory to the...
Слава нації! Україна! Україна!
Look at that. They might as well say glory to Israel instead of glory to Ukraine. Like, come on. This girl had white pride. Look, so you see they're actually Nazis. White pride on her thighs. Look at that. What more do I need to say? But you get it, man. This is just what a time to be alive. You got neo-Nazis fighting for a Jew. Hilarious, bro. This is why they're neo-Nazis. They're fucking retarded, man. This is the most funny thing I've ever seen. Oh my god.